What is up, Pats Nation? It is Patriots Global back here with another video, and today we're going to be looking more so towards training camp and basically 5 guys that I feel need to prove themselves in training camp in order for them to actually have a future with the New England Patriots. Now, that in itself is a very broad topic because I'm someone who believes every single player needs to prove themselves, and there, especially this season, are a lot of guys on the roster that must prove themselves, but these are ultimately the 5 guys I picked that really must prove themselves. Now, these are in no specific order, but with number 1, I have wide receiver Braxton Berrios. Berrios is somebody that I think us fans have been rooting for ever since the Patriots drafted him. Now, of course, last season, it didn't totally go his way. A big part of that was really because of injuries. Injuries really plagued him. He got put on the IR because, again, I think Bill Belichick also, and also the rest of the coaching staff, see something in him, so they put him on the IR and have him reserved for the following season. It's a year later, and Braxton Berrios has made his name fairly well known throughout the team. And also another good thing about Berrios is that he has visibly packed on a couple of pounds. Just mass-wise, he is looking a little bit bigger, which should also help him on the field, being able to bring down more contested catches, make stronger catches, and also hopefully be able to shed off some tackles. Berrios is a guy that is highly known for his football intelligence and his greedy demeanor, and he's going to need to keep that up. That is going to be one of the most important things for him to make the roster, but another thing is going to be him actually producing when it comes to this preseason games. He has to stay healthy, but he also needs to make sure that he's producing, he's showing progression, but most importantly, actually out of all of this, is showing that he has a connection with Tom Brady. You know, it doesn't really matter if he has a connection with Stidham, Etling, Hoyer. The big one is going to be Brady, because if he makes the roster, that's who's going to be throwing him the ball the entire regular season. Good news for Berrios is that the only 2 wide receivers that truly are locks is Julian Edelman and N'Keal Harry. The bad part is that there is so much great depth at the wide receiver position with the Patriots. You know, possibly Josh Gordon, if he gets reinstated, Demaryius Thomas, Dontrell Inman. So many guys here that can make their names known, and guys that have some things above Braxton Berrios, such as better experience, both playoff and Super Bowl wise, but are also elite wide receivers. So you can make the argument that it is good for Braxton Berrios and it's bad for Braxton Berrios. Ultimately, why he needs to prove himself this offseason is that if he doesn't, then I truly believe that Braxton Berrios could see the end of his tenure with the Patriots, because I don't feel that the Patriots are going to be able to get him on the practice squad. Now, I believe they would love to have him on the practice squad, but the thing is if the Patriots do release him, I do 100% believe that there will be another team that picks up Braxton Berrios and takes their chance on him. Now, next up is safety Obi Melifonu. Some say he's a cornerback, some say he's a safety, so actually I'm going to just go with defensive back. Now, Obi is a guy that joined the Patriots midway through the season last year. He got signed to a 2-year deal, and really what that was is they wanted to keep him for that whole rest of the season because they needed depth. But also they signed him to another deal worth the following year because they wanted a whole offseason for him to be with the team and really see what he's made of, to see if he can be a contributor for the following season. A former second-round pick with really great height and amazing talent. The only problem with him is that injuries have plagued the heck out of his NFL career. So far, Obi has not really done anything that should make you think that he is a roster lock. And even worse for him is that the Patriots have so much depth at cornerback. Now, they don't have much depth at safety. You can make the argument that they added Terrence Brooks, and that could be the challenge for Obi. But they added so many cornerbacks, and cornerbacks that have the ability to also play safety. Of course, he is in contract year with the Patriots, and he didn't sign a deal that makes you think that the Patriots are considering him a roster lock. Now, with Patrick Chung had been out of minicamp, they actually had Obi Melifonu coming in as that second string guy, which I find very interesting. Now, personally, me and really a bunch of other guys that I know, especially NFL reporters, consider Terrence Brooks, the safety that they signed this offseason, a roster lock. So the big question is, where does that leave Obi? Now, if you watched my 53-man roster prediction, you know that I didn't have him making it, and Obi was one of those guys that was a super hard decision to make, because if you have him making the team, then it's like he could seriously get cut, and you have him getting cut, and you're like, well, he could also make the team. So it's something that can go either way. But if he does not impress Bill Belichick at all, or injuries plague him, then he's going to be a guy that gets cut. Third up on my list, I have cornerback Keion Crossen. I ultimately had Keion in my 53-man roster video not making the roster, and that was for some pretty obvious reasons, that being the amazing depth that the Patriots have at cornerback. I've heard some people, such as, my guy over at DPN Sports Talk, highly regarding a guy like Keion Crossen and almost calling him a roster lock, which to me is by far the farthest thing. And in my personal opinion, I think that Duke Dawson is way more of a roster air quote lock than someone like Keion Crossen. Keion is a guy that did really well last training camp. He's one of the guys that stood out. I remember last offseason around this time, the big question was, who's going to make the team? Is it going to be J.C. Jackson or Keion Crossen? Keion Crossen was a guy that was related a lot back to Malcolm Butler and also mimics his play after someone like Malcolm Butler. Then we saw Keion Crossen actually get into the preseason, and we saw him in some NFL games getting actual defensive snaps, and he wasn't doing so great. There was nothing that truly stood out to me that goes, okay, he deserves some starting time. Really what happened and what his role came down to was a guy that is more backup defense, but has that main special teams purpose because he has such a fast ability. When you consider the fact that Keion Crossen obviously won't be making the team for his defense ability, especially because of all the competition that you have at cornerback, Duke Dawson, Juwan Williams, Jonathan Jones, Stephon Gilmore, Jason McCourty, just all those guys already at cornerback taking a spot. J.C. Jackson. Obviously, his role would have to become special teams, and you already looked at the Patriots have a whole lot of guys dedicated to special teams. Matthew Slater, Nate Ebner. You add even more guys this offseason that are going to be key special teams guys, such as Terrence Brooks, and you start to wonder exactly if special teams is going to be enough to get Keion Crossen on the actual roster. Then the Patriots draft Ken Webster in the 7th round of this past draft, and has been related to his play being just like Keion Crossen. So Crossen is going to have to prove that he is worth a roster spot, whether he steps his game up defensively or he steps it up even more when it comes to special teams. My fourth guy on this list is going to be linebacker Landon Roberts. Now, some people would say Landon Roberts is a lock, and I wouldn't go as far as to say he's a lock, but I definitely don't think he's on necessarily the edge of his seat when it comes to getting cut. Roberts is in the final year of his rookie contract and is expected to make a base salary of $2 million. Now, of course, $2 million really is not all that much, but it is enough for the Patriots to do something. It is some wiggle room that they could make, because we all know that the Patriots do like to make moves in the beginning of the season / the middle of the season. Right now, when you look at who the Patriots linebackers are, you have Dante Hightower, Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins, Juwan Bentley, and Brandon King, but Brandon King isn't a guy that actually plays linebacker. He's really just special teams. But those straight off the bat are 4 linebackers that I expect to be more so the starters, as they are very versatile in what they do. Landon Roberts is a guy that is only good at stopping the run, and even at times he struggles with that. He is not a coverage type of linebacker by any means. He's a very one-dimensional type of running back, and that's not exactly what the Patriots like to do with really any of their players. Again, you look at Juwan Bentley, you look at Jamie Collins, Dante Hightower, Kyle Van Noy. They're all guys that can do it all. Get pressure on the quarterback, play in coverage, and stop the run. When Jamie Collins got signed, the pretty interesting topic that started to go around is, okay, who is he going to replace? Then we find out that the competition is going to be between a Landon Roberts and Jamie Collins. And Jamie Collins took that job away from him basically as soon as he got back to New England. Then we hear that a Landon Roberts is starting to roll more so with these second string type of defensive players. Now, I could definitely see Bill Belichick keeping him for the sole purpose of having depth. Say one of those guys goes down, obviously you're going to want to have someone like a Landon Roberts. And I made sure I went and I looked at his stats from last season. And when I'm saying stats, I'm not talking about, quarterback hits, tackles. I'm talking about his snap count and how much he played defensively. And for most of the season, it was, 20%. And then there was times he was playing in the 50s. And then as the season started to go down, you have 12%, 37%, 32% of defensive snaps. But again, with Juwan Bentley now coming back and the addition of Jamie Collins, where exactly is he going to fit in the rotation? Roberts is a guy that I could totally see Bill Belichick using as potential trade bait. A guy in his contract year, Bill Belichick could get something good for him, especially when you have guys out there like Matt Patricia and the Lions. He's on the hot seat. Maybe he looks to add a linebacker that he knows how to use, but also maybe another team would be the Miami Dolphins and new head coach Brian Flores trying to add to his defense, as he's been adding pretty much nothing but Patriots players and coaches. If Roberts has a mediocre season, if he is having, problems tackling and stopping the run, then it's going to be a little bit hard for him to make this roster. But I think that if he can prove that he is good, if I'm prove that, that he can be elite in stopping the run, but can also contribute in getting pressure on the quarterback in the pass rush, but also being able to do something in coverage, then I think he makes the team. And lastly on my list, I have defensive end Dietrich Wise Jr. Now, me personally, this doesn't go to if he does improve himself, he doesn't make the roster. I'm not going that far, but I think he needs to prove himself, one, for the future of his time with the Patriots, because right now, he isn't anything that Bill Belichick 100% wants to get a contract done with. He had a great rookie year, then he kind of started to take a bit of a downfall. But with Trey Flowers gone, this is Dietrich Wise's time to come back in, get his defensive snaps back, and prove that he is a valuable asset to the Patriots, as the Patriots defensive line isn't totally up there. It's not up in the air, say like it is with, cornerbacks or wide receivers, but the Patriots defensive line is somewhat up in the air. And because Dietrich Wise has experience with the Patriots, something like Michael Bennett doesn't have with the Patriots, or something that Chase Winovich doesn't have, also he doesn't have NFL experience. So that is where Dietrich Wise will have a hand above both of them. But second, he needs to prove himself to Bill Belichick and the coaching staff, because that will seriously determine his season, where he plays on the defense, what teams he's playing against, whether he becomes a healthy scratch, or really most importantly, how many defensive snaps he's going to get. Last year with the team, he had 4.5 sacks, 30 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and 16 quarterback hits. Dietrich Wise brings an amazing personality to the Patriots team, the defense and the locker room. But he is also a very powerful and a very strong guy, and he has proven that day in and day out. If he can make his name heard in training camp, and again, this is his time to do it, then he is going to get more defensive snap counts, and his stats are going to take a rise, in which Bill Belichick will make it more of a priority to get him signed long term. There is no better time for Dietrich Wise to execute himself in this Patriots defense and make sure that his name is bolstered in Bill Belichick's head. But that is 5 guys that I feel need to prove themselves in this upcoming training camp that is in about, 2 weeks, I believe? But that is it for today's video. What are your guys' thoughts on my 5 guys that have to prove themselves? And what are some guys that you feel have to prove themselves and why? Let me know in the comments below. Also, guys, please make sure you like this video as it helps me and the growth of this channel very, very, very much. And if you're not subscribed yet, please do it. Please join the Patriots Global family and help me grow this so I can make this a full-time job. Make sure to share the video with everybody who knows from the Patriots Global family. And other than that, I will catch you guys in another video.